Okay, guys, I'm going to share the screen and I'm going to give Gavin a chance to read. It wasn't fair to ask Arthur. He didn't have a lot of sleep. It's not his fault. It's my fault, this. Just please read it coherently, Gav. Gavin, you're on mute. Gav? Gavin, can you hear me? Gavin? Is anybody else there?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can hear you.
Okay, well, I can't hear Gavin. Is Gavin on?
I heard him now.
I can't hear Gavin.
Gav? Kevin, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can't hear Gavin either.
I
I
can
can
hear you.
hear Kevin and Gavin and Lance.
We can't hear
And
Gavin.
Arthur.
What is it with today's share? What is it?
I don't. Well, it's raining here, so I don't know if the weather's like messing up with the connection.
All right,
Brendan,
well,
you read.
Lance, go read. I can't hear Gavin. I just can't.
Yeah, must I read?
Yeah, you might as well. I just obviously Gavin can't be heard.
Okay, they, the convicted Zomamim witnesses, divide a monetary sentence amongst themselves, but did not divide the number of lashes. Also, if they testify that he owed his fellow 200 zuz, they were found, and they were found to be Zomamim, they were thus sentenced to pay 200 zuz for the intended victim, to the intended victim. They divide the payment amongst themselves, with each of the two witnesses paying 100 zuz. But if they testified against him that he was liable to 40 lashes, and they were found to be Zomamim, they were thus sentenced to the reciprocal punishment of 40 lashes. Each one receives 40 lashes, and the lashes are not apportioned amongst the witnesses.
Okay, perfect. So, bottom line is we said that it's actually 40 lashes minus 139. So, according to into the Mishnah that we're going to cover in the 22nd daf eventually, you standardly would give the Adam Zomamim a reciprocal punishment. In the case of money, we find that the funding can combine to actually make a single payment. So if it's 200 zuz, each of the conspiring witnesses would pay 100 zuz back. If, for example, the defendant was accused of stealing or damaging worth 300 zuz, and you had three Eidim Zomamim, each one would pay 100 back. If it has to do with lashes, we don't give each of the Eidim Zomamim 13 lashes. Each one receives the full 39. Why? Because of the human nautical principle that if you've got this Gezerah Shava, where the laws of one passage in the Torah can be applied to another, and you see this cross-referencing, it comes from Moshe at Har Sinai, we know that in Bamidbar, Numbers, chapter 35, verse 20, that it uses this term Rasha. And the guilty one refers to both somebody that suffers a death penalty as well as somebody that gets lashes. And that's mentioned in Devarim, Deuteronomy chapter 25, verse 2, meaning just as you don't divide their sentences, obviously, because each one of the Eidim Zomamim gets what they intended to do. But money is seen more of a compensatory nature. So we'll go through that and what exactly it means. And the bottom line is that there's a conceptual difference between Zomamim punishments of money and lashes. Obviously, in the case of a monetary payment, obviously Rabbi Akiva sees it as a penalty. But most of the Rabbonim and the Tanna Kamma, which is the general rabbinical consensus, see it as compensation to the intended victim for the money which the Zomamim sought to deprive him. And therefore, if the verdict went against him, they are paying for compensation of what they cost him. The fact that it didn't actually come down to sentencing and they were caught up midstream they still it's seen as a compensatory process. So the Zomamim can pool their separate funds to make up the required payment, and it becomes a single unit of money, which belongs to the victim. In the case of lashes, unless you're a sociopath, the intended victim receives nothing when his antagonists are punished. He doesn't get anything out of it. And therefore, they're not a form of compensation, but according to the Torah, it's a penalty. It's punitive in nature. So it's seen as a punishment. And that's one of the principles. So there's an argument, as you know, with the buyer who said, because we want to see where the source is that they don't share the lashes. So there's this term rasha, guilty one, that a buyer says, as I said, it's in Devarim, concerning those who are liable to lashes. And the same word rasha is done in a Gezerah Shava format of the full sentence, not just the word rasha, because you can see rasha in many pesukim. It doesn't mean there's a Gezerah Shava because there's a single word. It's about how those two sentences are phrased. But concerning those who are liable to execution, it's phrased in the same way as the way that one is liable to lashes. Just as there, in the case of the death sentence, there's no execution by half measures. Each plotting witness is liable for what they sought to do to their victim. So too with lashes, you can't divide it by the appropriate number of lashes with the appropriate number of plotting or scheming witnesses. Okay? Now, Rav has got a different opinion to a buyer. He said, look, in order to properly carry out the reciprocal punishment, we need to do to each witness exactly in the pasuk in Deuteronomy chapter 19, verse 19, which says, as he planned to do to his brother. And obviously this is going to be lacking if we gave each of those victims a divided sentence of lashes. Why? Because what did they tend to do to their intended victim? Obviously, in a case where there were 39 lashes and he was of good health, is get one person lashed 39 times. And therefore, in order to fulfill the pasuk to do to him as he intended to do to his brother, each one of them should feel what he would have suffered, because his lashes, had the Adam Zomamim been caught, the defendant would have felt the full brunt of it. So the Gemara says to Rava, look, well, how do you explain this with regards to monetary payment? Because maybe each one of them should feel what it's like to be cracked for the entire sum of money. And the answer the Gemara gives is that it can be combined to form one joint reciprocal payment, because it's seen as basically compensatory in nature for losses once the verdict has been given, and not as a punitive damage or penalty at which the victim doesn't get any sort of joy. In other words, if you say to me, do you want the person that plotted against you for R1,000,000 to pay you the money or to get lashed? What would each of you say? What would you say? What would you want? The money or the box? There was a show in the 80s. The money or the lashes? Obviously, you can't do anything when the other person gets lashed. But with the money, you can do something productive. Now, granted, according to Rabbi Akiva, it's seen as also punitive in nature, but it's not in the sense that, according to the rabbis, there's no difference between verdict and sentencing, as I said. So it's compensatory in terms of one legal process. Okay, is that clear? Can I share the other Mishnah? Gavin, can you hear me now? Because I couldn't hear you before. Gav?
Kabb, can you hear us?
I mean, he's eating, that's why.
No, I don't mind him munching. I just want to hear his munching. Okay, I know what he has to do. He has to, at a certain point after the shiur,
I can hear you.
reboot his computer, Brendan. That's all he has to do. That's happened to me sometimes, that's all.
Most of the time fixes it. He says he can hear us though.
No, I believe he can hear us, but I wanted him to read the second Mishnah for the schus of it. But anyway, it is what it is. So, halachically, Brendan, you can't yet. You will get your stripes, but at the moment you can't. So what I'm going to ask Gavin not Gavin to do. Gavin, I appreciate you can hear everyone, but we can't get you to read the Mishnah as much as we want to, but there'll be another Mishnah. Kevin, I want you to read it. Just give me one
Okay.
sec. Just give me one sec. Sorry about this revision, guys, but we do revision when nobody can give it over to me or with relative clarity. And it's not unreasonable that a person does chazorah. Okay, so Kevin, you want to read this?
Yeah. Witnesses do not become zomamim until other witnesses discredit them personally. How so? If they said in their testimony, we testify against this man that he killed someone, and the second set of witnesses said to them, how can you testify to such a thing when the murder victim or the alleged murderer was with us that day in such and such a place? These first witnesses are not rendered zomamim by this form of refutation. But if the second pair of witnesses said to them, how can you testify about this event when you were with us on that day in such and such a place? The first witnesses are zomamim, and they are put to death by their word, i.e., that is, by the testimony of the second set of witnesses. If other witnesses came after the first set had already been discredited, and the new set testified to the same crime as at the first set, they who discredited the first set discredited them, the new set, through hazama as well, by testifying that these new witnesses were also with them somewhere else at the time of the alleged crime. And still others came with the same testimony as the previous two sets of witnesses, and they discredited them through hazama as well. Even if this scenario was repeated 100 times, all of those who were thus discredited are executed as zomamim witnesses. The testimony of the two witnesses that the other 100 sets were all with them somewhere else is believed to establish all 100 sets as zomamim. Rav Yehuda says, this is a group of plotters who have conspired to discredit anyone who testifies against the accused. It is inconceivable that every group that claimed to have witnessed that crime happened to be elsewhere in the company of the discrediting witnesses. Thus, their testimony is rejected, and only the first set of witnesses is executed. The Gemara will explain why.
Okay, so I just want to bring your attention to two things in the Mishnah. The first thing is that it's the first time we picked up nuances, because initially when we started Makkos, we thought it was just about the fact that a particular crime didn't occur at that time and place, and that's what make the person a conspiring witness. In other words, if the witness has said this person was murdered in Santon City at 2 p.m. on Tuesday, the 4th of February, then when it comes about that the murder victim wasn't in Santon City at that particular time and date, or the alleged murderer was in a different city, we would have thought initially that that would have made the person Adim Zomamim, because they couldn't have possibly witnessed what they witnessed. And what we are discerning here is that there is a difference. Because in the first example, where either the victim or the alleged murderer, time and location and details of the case is not what they testified, and you've got a second set of witnesses. So bear in mind here, you've got two sets. You've got a second set that said, well, the murderer was with them, or the victim was with them at this time and place. Now, whether or not it's the case or not, today we've got Instagram, we've got DNA prints, we've got forensics. There's a myriad of pieces of evidence, but you're going to have to think of it in times where also maybe the volume of crime wasn't that high and the population wasn't that high. And when you go to the gym today, you need biometrical coding. So everything there had a high percentage of chance to be conflated. So in that first example, guys, where either the victim or the murderer might or might not have been there, we can't necessarily say that the second set of witnesses need to be believed against the first set, because it's actually a form of refutation. It's a contradiction. And when you've got contradicting testimonies, you don't know whether or not to believe the first or second set of witnesses, because it's a case of legal doubt. And therefore, we cannot act upon the testimony of either set of witnesses. In the second case, however, the facts of the case aren't challenged directly. What's being challenged is that the murder may very well have occurred in the manner told by the first set of witnesses, meaning, just say there was the murderer at Sandton City on Tuesday, the 4th of February, and the victim was there who was murdered at the same time and date. The problem is when there's a second set of witnesses that say the first set of witnesses couldn't have viewed the crime because they were with them in Bloemfontein on that day. What's coming into question is the integrity of the witnesses. And if a second set of witnesses can prove that the first set were not with them were with them at a different province at the time they related to having witnessed the crime, that's considered hazama, at which we can believe the second set of witnesses according to Moshe at Har Sinai, and the reciprocal penalty is that they intended to do to the victim is done to them, and in this case, they put to death. Do you see the difference, guys? Do you see the difference? Yes or no? Pretty straightforward. Guys, any response? I feel like I'm having
Yes, yes.
seance here.
All clear.
Okay, good. Kevin, Brendan, Gavin, Arthur, anybody have any questions on that?
The difference between what was the comparison? Just I didn't get that actually. I know you.
No, Kevin, it's fine to ask. That's exactly why I'm
What
asking.
difference? Sorry, I may have switched off for us when you were doing the comparison. What's the difference between what?
So what I'm saying is, if you've got a second set of witnesses testifying that either the victim of the homicide or the murderer was with them in a different province, we do not put to death the first set of witnesses, because although it's a contradiction of testimony to the first set, it's two contradicting testimonies, and we do not know which set of witnesses to believe. According to the laws of Moshe at Sinai, the only time we believe the second set of witnesses against the first set is when they can prove by their testimony, I'm sure there would have to be some sort of proofing check, that they were with them in a different province when the alleged crime that they witnessed was seen to have taken place. It certainly wasn't seen to have been taken place by the first set of witnesses. So their personal integrity is being put into question, and they're given the reciprocal punishment. In this case, it's talking about a capital case. In many cases, it's just corporal punishment of lashes for breaking a negative commandment, or alternatively a monetary case. So we're saying that law of Moshe of Har Sinai, of the hazama, the reciprocal punishment, doesn't occur unless the witnesses are placed in another location by the second set. And Gavin asked a good question, which is coming past in the second part of the Mishnah, and so did Lance, is that, like, how do we know who to believe? Because once you've got it set up that we automatically believe the second set of witnesses, if I'm in the witness box and I want to get off the hook, all I would do is have a set of people I know testify that the first set were not at that location to witness me committing the crime, because they alleged the first set was with them in a different location. so it can be manipulated. That's what Gavin and Lance were mentioning. And then Lance also mentioned the fact that saying, listen, there's a problem. When we both see it a little bit from Rav Yehuda's point of view. Rabbi Yehuda was saying, and I just want to share the screen at that point, but I had to build step upon step. Okay? If you look at it, it says, okay, if other witnesses came after the first set had already been discredited, and the new set testified to the same crime as did the first set, and they were discredited the first set through Hazama as well, and the story repeated itself over and over again, all of those who were discredited are executed as Eidim Zomimim. And the testimony of the two witnesses that the other 100 set were all with them somewhere else is believed to establish all 100 sets are at Zomimim. And Rabbi Yehuda is saying, no, there's something wrong here. This is a group of plotters, meaning if you've got a second set of witnesses that are keep saying that the first set were with them at a different place, how could there be so many people in Potchefstroom? It's only got a limited amount of people. It's Brendan and his mates and a couple of family members, and that's it. Have you ever driven through Potch? So how come there could be 100 people that are with that second set in Potch? Something is wrong. How can all those sets of witnesses be wrong? It's got to be the second set must be in on this in some way. But this is the part that's puzzling, Lance. And we're going to go through this in the Gemara. When it says, thus their testimony is rejected, because it's inconceivable that every group is claimed to have witnessed that crime happened to be elsewhere in the company of the discrediting witnesses. But my question, and this is going to be answered in the Gemara, is then why is the first set of witnesses executed? Can you see, Lance, why that's a problem? They shouldn't be executed. Lance? Are you on speakerphone? I feel like...
I'm not sure why they wouldn't be executed.
No. The question is, I'm not sure why they would be executed. Let me tell you.
Why should they be executed?
Why should they
That's
be?
what you're
Because,
saying.
Lance, you've got two different opinions. The rabbis are saying it doesn't matter how many times this replays itself. Every time the second set said the first set are with them somewhere else, this will keep repeating. They don't discern, firstly, whether it's a different set of second witnesses or not. But even if it's the same or different, the first set are not believed and the second set is, and the first set continually get the Hazama reciprocal penalty, and it doesn't matter if 100 first sets get executed. We believe the second set. That's the law of Moshe Hasina. That's the rabbinical opinion. So that in it alone is a bit of a problem, because what Gavin said to me made sense, is that something's wrong here. When the second set, how can everybody be with the second set? And if you want to say that there are different sets of second sets and different sets of first sets, even that's a problem. Because how could the defendant be that lucky? He must have spread a lot of money around town for a second set of witnesses to keep cropping up to get off the hook from the death penalty.
Kill them all.
What?
Kill them all. They're all busy undermining court. Kill them all. Finished.
And thank God. But I would agree that, by the way, I would have a character like Lance there on the 8th of October to flatten Gaza with because it takes because Lance would have solved the problem.
Absolutely.
So I get that. But then Rabbi Yehuda's statement doesn't make sense if you hold by that. Because Rabbi Yehuda's statement makes sense when he said, listen, there's a plot. If the first set keep getting discredited and this replays itself, there's obviously something wrong. Firstly, if you hold that the second set is the same set and 100 people went with them on holiday and keep appearing with them in different locations or the same location. In other words, second set says against every one of the first sets, you were with us in Potchefstroom. You were with us. You couldn't have been. Something's wrong. If you want to say it plays out that maybe there's different sets of first and second sets of witnesses, there's still something wrong. There's something fishy. And therefore, Rabbi Yehuda's last statement is the first set of witnesses are executed, but the rest aren't. That alone is difficult to believe. Why? Why is it difficult to believe? Because if something's fishy, why should the first set get executed and the rest not? Why do they not all either get executed or get off? It's either fishy or it's not. Am I making
How
sense
do
to
they,
you guys in terms of the question?
yeah, how do they verify the witnesses?
That's a different
Yeah.
process we learnt in Sanhedrin, cross testimony of witnesses, etc. All I want us to do is at this point understand the principles of the daf we're dealing with. Do you get the reason I'm saying this, Brendan, is because it goes through different chapters in Sanhedrin and other books about how they check. Particularly, Sanhedrin deals with capital cases where they're looking for any excuse not to put the person to death. But this was the interesting chidush that we learned the other day with Rav Simcha. And I'm telling you, Gavin, we never picked this up, myself, you, or Ian Shapiro, when we did Sanhedrin, which is why the two of you were going to write a book. And that was if the Sanhedrin doesn't put the murderer to death directly because he committed murder in a way where he wasn't warned beforehand, saying that this is a death penalty offense. According to some opinions, the death penalty, specific death penalty, has to be stated to him. In other opinions, it doesn't have to be. But either way, there has to be hazra, which is a warning by two sets of witnesses, which means anybody that kills impulsively without saying, I am thus about to kill Shmuel because I'm angry with him. And then the other people say, no, no, don't do that. That's not a good one. You're going to get, if he doesn't declare it and just stabs him in the throat, he gets off because he wasn't warned. So Gavin and I had a problem with that. Do you remember, Gavin, initially? Because who's going to set themselves up to do it in front of two witnesses? You might as well just kill the person in front of one witness. You're fine. Or in two witnesses, but you don't say it, I'm thus about to commit an act. You just quickly shoot or stab the person without a warning, you're off. The other problem is groma, indirect. You tie them to the pier of the beach where the tide is coming in and nature takes its course and they drown. It's indirect, it's groma. So we initially, Brendan, had a problem with all of this, except what we learned the other day in Makkos with Rav Simcha Steinhauer, when I brought up this issue, my hang-up in Sanhedrin, he said, no, we give them the barley treatment, which is basically you hardly give them anything to eat and drink. And when their stomachs shrunk, you give them barley to eat because they're starving and a lot of water and they're thirsty. And then they're going to go click, click, boom, which means they're going to die of natural causes, but the Sanhedrin didn't put them to death. The barley did it. It was the barley, Your Honor. So therefore, we never knew that before. So the fact that it's not a bloody Sanhedrin that it kills once every 70 years, the person's still getting the death penalty. So I kind of really am battling with this whole concept of why go through these things where somebody's really off when they're not off and they just get a different death penalty because nature takes its course. But I also understand that you can't let somebody off the hook because at the end of the day, if they're guilty, you can't let them off on a technicality. So I'm still battling with these concepts myself, Brendan, by the way. And I think Gavin is also, which is why Gavin, myself, and Ian Shapiro didn't quite know that this was the default barley treatment of people that in other words, one of the cases that were brought is that if you committed a murder and hid amongst other men, etc., and we don't know who it is, there are all sorts of things that are brought up. Arthur, if you're doing okay, just wave at a certain point. All right. So I think Arthur's fallen asleep or gone to bed probably.
No, there he is.
Blame him. Okay, Arthur's, thank God, good. All right. So we've touched on this the second Mishnah, And we see that there's a contrasting opinion between Rabbi Yehuda and the rabbis. So what we've got to understand, the Gemara is going to go through why the rabbis are saying no matter how much this is repeated, we stick with the law of Moshe at Har Sinai. And we've got to say with Rabbi Yehuda, why does he not hold by the rabbis? Because people generally should hold by the general rabbinic opinion because that's halacha. And why does he make an exception in the first case where the first set of witnesses are executed and the rest are not? Either there's something fishy at which nobody should be executed, or nothing fishy at which they should all be executed. We're going to deal with this next time. The only thing of it is, Kevin, instead of joining another shir, I'd like you to teach us something that we wouldn't have derived from logic, not what you taught us today, but something that is a bit of a chiddush.
Okay, I'll try if I can. But then I've got a joke for the end, okay?
Sure.
A comment. Okay, so I hope this is a chiddush here. So we were in the upcoming parshas, the upcoming parshas discuss the exile, the Egyptian exile, and the plagues end in Parshat Beshalach. So I looked at the plague of the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments are discussed in Parshat Beshalach, and the one of the Ten Commandments is thou shalt not covet. And okay, I think I have a chiddush. So anyway, so thou shalt not covet says one should not covet other people's wives, possessions, and even says don't covet your neighbor's donkey. Now, that seems like such a trivial. Most people, I think, may have had a donkey, but a donkey is like a basic possession. And what I think the chiddush could be, Damon, please correct me, is that we mustn't be jealous or envious of anyone's possessions, even if it's a simple thing, because Hashem has given people, all of us, we've been gifted with certain midot and possessions for a certain reason, and for Avodat Hashem, if possible, it's a lifetime work, as I mentioned. So even if someone has something basic, they can use it for that, for a higher purpose, and we mustn't be jealous. And you get very wealthy people have been gifted wealth, and some people have built shuls and created and have contributed to Yiddishkeit flourishing. And so people, for whatever reason, are given things for reasons we don't understand. So even someone who has a simple donkey, maybe that's a donkey is more, which we may not have. It's there for a purpose. And okay, I hope that made sense.
Firstly, it makes a lot of sense. And in terms of being given a simple donkey, one of my friends said to me that that's what being married is like. And his wife refers to him as a simple donkey, not the other way around. But on a serious note, Lance did us a hell of a favor, because during the Parsha of Beshalach, Lance, it's not just for yesterday, it's for this whole week. We should say that prayer for manna, in order that we become one of the main manna and earn a lot of manna. So
Damon, can I give you my joke?
Yeah, please do.
It's related to what we're learning. So it's a comment that if you don't find this funny, I won't be offended. So if the certain sets of witnesses were testifying that they were with the accused and they were at a Grand Slam tennis final, they were at Wimbledon. The first set testified that the second set didn't watch the first set, but the third set testified that the second set watched the first set. So who do you believe?
Okay, but I'm one better about the donkey thing. It might get to the stage where you can't tell this is the donkey and the wife, and therefore you might covet the wife by accident. So don't go for his donkey.
I notice, Arthur, how brave you are when Nadine is hoping that you would say such a thing. That's how naive you are.
Not my wife. I mean, I'm just saying, people out there.
Yeah, they've got another word for a donkey, which people describe as this falcon, and no, it's a something. It starts with an A.
So what?
It's tucha.
Ah, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So
Don't make of that or you and I.
exactly.
Apparently, a donkey is actually a very nice work creature to have. It's actually super strong.
You know what? There are
Yeah,
sources that
well,
Moshe is coming on a donkey and Bilam read on a donkey, and there are a lot of midrashim that discuss character traits of a donkey. It's quite amazing. Um,
Yeah.
all right.
The
Just
wife
guys,
just needs to hear it.
yeah, guys, just have a wonderful day. But do you understand why we
Shkach,
went
Damon.
past the Mishnahs again? Because they weren't fresh from the other day. And sometimes, I know you guys don't have time to do Chazorah, but we had to bring up all the issues that are going to be brought up in the Gemaras. We needed to bring Abaya and Rava's opinion of where the sourcing was, of splitting monetary obligations versus lashes. We needed to discuss Rabbi Yehuda versus the rabbis. We needed to understand about it's not about the placement of the victim nor the murderer, but of the witnesses to trigger the Eidem Zimmerman reciprocal penalty, and about all of these issues. So I thought the show was very worthwhile. Thank you for attending. All the best.
Shkach,
Yeah.
thanks. Cheers.
Cheers.